So what is a quick, easy way for you to be able to tell whether or not your scope is first focal plane, second focal plane, or fixed? Well, I'm about to show you a quick, easy way to do this. Simply look down your scope and start adjusting the power. As you zoom in, look at the reticle. What's it doing? Is it changing in size or is it staying the same, like this one? If it's staying the same, it is a second focal plane scope. The reason being is because the reticle itself is in between your eye and the magnifier, meaning it is not being magnified whatsoever. So it stays the same size. So again, this is a second focal plane scope. So now let's move on to the Arcon Optics SH4 4-14 by 44. And as we zoom in on this scope, we see that the reticle is actually changing this time. It's getting larger as we zoom in, meaning it is a first focal plane scope. The reason being is because the reticle is after the magnifier, which means the reticle itself is being magnified by the optic. And as we're about to zoom back out, you'll see that the reticle itself does start to get smaller. Now, if anybody wants to argue with me on this, that's fine. I don't claim to be an expert. But sometimes you just got to do a little research. I mean, sometimes you just got to do, look at the scope that's mounted on your gun. Sometimes it's stamped right there on the scope, FFP. I wonder what that stands for. That sort of research. Anyway, moving on. Let's move on to the Burris RT6 1-6 by 24. And yes, guys, I know that its trees are sideways, but that's the only way I could get this thing to focus. But as we zoom in and out, what's happening in the reticle? Well, nothing. It's staying the same size because it's a second focal plane scope, meaning the reticle is in between your eye and the magnifier, meaning the reticle itself will not be magnified. Now let's go ahead and move on to another scope, which is the Trijicon ACOG styled reticle scope. And as we look through this scope, what's going on? Well, absolutely nothing's going on because it's a fixed scope. You can't vary the power, and the reticle stays exactly the same. So this would be our third option, and that's a fixed scope. What's going on inside your scope when you're considering first focal plane and second focal plane? Well, check out this high-tech representation of the magnifier inside your scope. Well, not really. It's a Duracell battery, but you'll get the point. So that represents your magnifier. This is your reticle. So what happens when you're changing the magnification and the reticle is here? What happens to the reticle? Well, nothing, because it's not being magnified. It's on this side. That's second focal plane. First focal plane, your reticle is here. So what happens when you change the magnification? Well, the reticle itself is going to change because it's actually being magnified. So that's first focal plane. Well, they can all shoot accurately, of course, but you might be asking yourself, which scope is right for you? FFP, SFP, or fixed? Well, my experience tells me you can't go wrong with a fixed scope. Early on in my deer hunting career, I had a Remington 280 with a fixed 4-power scope. And let me tell you what, it was a deer slayer. Next up is an FSP, second focal plane scope. SFP is what is generally on probably most your scopes out there. It's good for just general purpose use for just about, anything from hunting to target shooting, self-defense. It's a good fit for a lot of different types of shooting. When would you want to start going FFP or first focal plane? Well, when you start wanting to be much more precise over a long distance. If you're one of these guys that wants to hit dimes or thumbtacks at 800-900 yards or 1,000 yards, you might want to start looking at FFP. Having said that, you can still reach out pretty good with a SFP. Let's take a look at the user manual of the Burris that we looked at today. It talks about the ballistic AR is perfect for 3-gun, close quarter battle, or big game stalking with a trajectory compensation out to 600 yards. For most guys shooting, SFP is just fine. Well, there's a video. Hope you will like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next video.